Hey guys, this is Anon, and I'm bringing a couple older gameplays today that I pulled out of the kind of proverbial time machine I just hadn't gotten to. And we're going to focus on the Panther II, the German Tier 8 medium tank. Use the term medium a little bit loosely because it's definitely more of a heavium that I'm sure I'll talk about more as I go here. But this is a tank I don't play very much because it is one of my personal least favorite tanks in the entire game. I kind of loathe it. I'm not terrible in it. I've actually been pretty purple in my stats my entire career with it, even though I had it fairly early, but I have always really struggled to win in it. I think even now I float around the 50% win rate margin, even with good personal stats. And I think a lot of it is just because of the profile and the way this tank lays out. It doesn't carry particularly well, especially in the late game. It doesn't have a very large or very strong armor profile, especially because considering it is a pretty slow tank. It also has a really low alpha firing gun at 220, which is slightly less than even the Americans at 225 for Tier 8, which struggle with alpha a little bit too. So the DPM is pretty solid, the pen is good, the gun handling stats are really good, but when you combine kind of the armor and the mobility on it, it can be a little bit lacking, and because of that is a lot of reasons I think I struggle in late game situations with it, just because it doesn't fit the profile of one that I think clutches up particularly well. So I get requests for this tank a lot, and so that's why I decided to go ahead and finally pull out some of this gameplay so you can see kind of how I handle it. In general, I feel like the Panther II is a sniper, pretty pure to the term for medium. The gun is so incredibly accurate with a 0.3 dispersion once it's kind of maxed out with good provisions and whatnot, which is pretty fantastic. That's pretty much a laser beam. It's got really good shell velocity as well, even on its AP, so it's going to hit most of the time. It's just because of that low alpha, it means it's going to have to hit a lot, and even though it can side scrape because it's got some pretty good side angling, frontally it gets penned pretty easily, especially from equal and higher tiers. So I usually try and keep everything at a distance with this tank. I want some good space between me and the enemy tanks as much as I can, and that's what you can see that I'm doing right here on Mirage. Anytime I see I'm in a medium and I go kind of wide out into the dunes, if I see everything gets spotted up around the falls or up on this hill, I like to push all the way around just like I did. Works the same way if you spawn on the other side, so you can get some nice flanking shots, especially in a game like this where you're in a tank that necessarily doesn't have the strongest armor. You can let your team kind of hold off on that damage a little bit and instead use your accuracy and good pen. So because the tanks are pushing up now to my right, I have to push forward a little bit just to avoid some of those shots, and I'm constantly rolling forward and backward because my front plate was at a really good angle to the stuff up on that hill, and that's going to let me get a few of those bounces. The armor isn't atrocious. I don't necessarily want to sell it as that. It's just not nearly as strong as some other tanks. Okay, so now that all three of those red tanks have pushed to our right, they're all pretty high health, all pretty good armor tanks. I'm going to go ahead and continue to push up and through here. Again, I'm still trying to keep good distance between myself and those tanks. I really don't want to be in a close situation until very late game, more on like a 1 versus 1 or 1 versus 2, unless I absolutely have to get myself out of position. So anytime you have that kind of profile of a tank, I think positioning is really important, and I know a lot of people that's something that you're constantly kind of working on. It's one of the most important aspects of the game, along with awareness, and they kind of go hand in hand. So keeping that distance and just knowing where the tanks are. I know where the two are, and I know I had a pretty good idea that Pershing was going to start pushing around behind us, but because these two heavies are kind of pushing and I've got shots, I'm trying to hang in here as long as I can and just working them as best as I can, because I also had a little bit of a hit point pool, but you can see how quickly that goes away against these big tanks when you just don't have the armor. They've got really good alpha, so able to kind of beat down on that. So I'm backing up a little bit because I can't take a shot. Now that my teammate has more health, I was letting him kind of absorb, so I'm trying to get that shot in here. Again, it has really good pen, so you're trying to work that as much as you can. You can go through some areas that other tanks necessarily can't. And honestly, that was pretty good luck there. I think I probably had enough hull exposed, but I know we're both one-shots. Honestly, at this point, this is what I was saying, that this tank has a hard time clutching up, because I really need to be far away but to be able to hold these tanks off, but I can't do that in this situation. And with the armor profile, honestly, if they were both to push right now, they have the health, they probably could have taken us, but luckily they held back just enough that we were able to continue working in here and go ahead and get that final kill shot. So like I said, I'm just really focusing on the fact that I'm trying to keep distance as much as possible. To me, that's really how you win in this tank, even though I don't always have the best results in it. You're going to have to farm damage as much as you can because you're taking on that sniper role. It just means a lot of firing in the process. That was a really good example. Obviously, that's a lot of damage, especially at tier 8 and medium, so certainly happy with that. But just kind of showing some examples of that. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to one more battle here on Vineyards. Same platoon mate, again, an older video, but still kind of shows, in my opinion, how to best handle this tank as situationally as you can. So this game, I think, is going to really highlight just incredibly how passive I think you need to play this as long as you can. Obviously, when you get into a late game scenario, that things change a little bit, and sometimes you have to be more aggressive and pick your spots on how to use that aggression. But early on in battles, I want to conserve as much hit points as I can, and honestly, even farther than that, I like to remain unspotted as much as I can, because unless you're really, really fantastic at the minimap and having that great situational awareness, most people I don't think can keep kind of a good mental image of where all 7 tanks are. So if you aren't spotted, it's much less likely you're going to take a shot from a tank that you don't know where it is. So that's always something to kind of keep in mind. Being invisible is always preferable, and it's not always easy in Blitz because the maps are so small, and we all know that they occasionally will take away some of our cover on map reworks, so just something to be careful with. So, like I said, I took those first couple shots, and as soon as I got spotted by shooting at that Borsig, I decided to go ahead and roll back and let my camo reset. It's multiple reasons. They've pushed really hard to the left and to the ruin side, and I don't have a lot of help there or anything to spot. I'm basically going to be the spotter for that direction, and my team is to the right, so they aren't going to provide quite as much cover for that. So I'm just taking it very slow. I'm rolling up. Gun depression on this tank is a little funky. It's got a little bit more on the side than out the front, and 8 degrees out the side is good, but it's a little bit hard to use when I'm rolling up and down these hills like that. So even though that IS was exposed, I decided to roll back instead of taking that shot because I would have had to make myself extremely vulnerable. And it was probably a good choice because this RU is starting to push to the left, and now I see stuff starting to get spotted. I've got a Chi-Ri coming, an STA, all here on my left side. And I'm trying to use as much armor as I can on this tank. You can pen the turret, especially with premium ammo if you aim well, but when you're moving and rolling around, it's fairly strong. It's enough to hold down at your own tier and lower. Tier 9s are pretty much going to go through it, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast. So again, playing very, very passive here, using as much cover as I can and just trying to take my shots and roll back. I'm pretty hull down, which the hull on this tank is where you're really going to lose a lot of that armor, but they're playing really passively as well, so it lets me be kind of careful with it. I've got some support directly behind me in an SU, and he does a really good job in this game in general. He's protecting me quite a bit here because HE shells can go through both of those targets, so he's playing a little bit slow. And now that my team is starting to get involved in spot, I can see that they have spotted 4 tanks to my right, which means that these 2 in front of me are fairly alone. That's why I start to push up just a little bit. I'm trying to whittle them down a little bit, because the Panther II, one of the strong suits it does have is its ramming ability. It's very heavy, and that's why it's a little bit sluggish. And so I'm just trying to whittle them down enough, and this is when I decide to go ahead and make that move and push in for the ram on the 251 and kill the STA, so I can take care of this flank. Now we have all the tanks to our right side. I did sacrifice a fair amount of health with it, but again, that's that little bit of controlled aggression. Basically just telling my platoon mate there because he wasn't on voice at the time. But you have to be controlled with your aggression. I sacrificed hit points, which I don't like to do in this tank very much, but we're able to completely lock down the flank and now keep all the tanks where we know kind of their positioning. So now I'm going to go back to more of a passive role and be careful again, because there's still some dangerous tanks left in this Chi-Ri with its great DPM, and most importantly this IS-3. I know their ISU and and the Borsig is more in the ruins area. So just trying to stay aware of that, and because they aren't spotted, I need to be careful about getting spotted because I don't want to get shot, and that's why I'm hanging out on the right side of these dunes instead of pushing up a little bit farther. I'm just kind of letting it play out, hoping they make a mistake. I don't have so many hit points that can necessarily play around with it. My team especially is low on hit points, like my platoon mate that just fell there, and this SU is a pretty low health as well. So now's when I decide to go ahead and push a little bit. Luckily that team is able, or my teammate there is able to go ahead and get rid of the Borsig, which is the most dangerous tank left, and I'm just trying to keep this defender down. He doesn't have gun depression to work ridges, so as long as you can push him down, it adds a lot of advantage, and also because the enemy SU isn't spotted, and I know he was in that kind of ruins range or the bridge, which is what my platoon mate is helping me with. And so when the defender pushes to the right a little bit, that's when it actually makes more sense to push. Unfortunately, that Sue is in the wrong spot, and I get a lucky bounce because he could have hurt my day pretty strong there. But I'm able to go ahead and get rid of the IS-3, and now I can set up in more of a side-scraping maneuver because he's down low. But I'm over-angled here, that's a mistake, but you can still see the low armor, so he's able to get a good roll in, especially with the higher damage 122 that tank has, but able to go ahead and finish that off. So this isn't an ace, but I wanted to highlight it just because of the passive nature of it. I hope you like this tank. Like I said, it's not one you're going to see me in very often because I don't personally enjoy it, but I hope this helped a little bit to kind of figure out how to work through that grind.